F-Zero GX is one of my all-time favorite video games. Despite coming out decades ago, it still looks and plays beautifully. From the small details such as the wear and tear on the vehicles, to the advanced techniques creating an incredibly high skill ceiling, this game is always a treat to play. But one thing that this game is notorious for is the difficulty. Even beating this game's story on normal is an achievement in its own right, which naturally means I've never come anywhere close to 100%ing this game before. So when F-Zero GX very quickly became my single most requested game to play for RetroAchievements, I was excited because it wasn't a matter of if, but when. And while many videos on my channel are more about humble beginnings as I practice to overcome challenges, this time was very different. The moment these streams began, I was out for blood to avenge my childhood self that had no hope of unlocking everything. And through sheer determination and focus, I began completing some of the hardest missions and staff ghosts on the very first attempt. So buckle up as we begin this journey, and a very special thank you to Spacey Tora for the thumbnail art. This massive retro achievement set has 4 main categories that you'll need to complete in order to master it, but thankfully, none of the achievements are missable. I began my journey by going straight to story mode, and this ended up being the worst possible choice I could have made, because I completely forgot that you have to purchase each new mission in the shop afterwards, meaning that in order to actually afford the next mission, you're either grinding the higher difficulties immediately, or you're doing some Grand Prix or staff ghosts in between. But what's done is done, so chapter 1 is Captain Falcon Trains. But don't let that title fool you, because this is not a tutorial at all. On normal mode, you have to grab 25 capsules and finish the race in 80 seconds, but by the time you reach very hard, you have to get 35 in 60 seconds, meaning you don't have time to slow down. And mission 1 is actually one of the hardest ones to clear on very hard, in part because you'll initially feel overwhelmed by the capsule placement, so the key is to learn how to break it down into 3 laps, and know what you want to collect on each lap, as well as have a backup strategy. One key mechanic of F-Zero is that you can't use your boost until lap 2, so I want my first lap to be on the inside of the track as much as possible, so I'm traveling less distance and I can unlock it as soon as I can. The bigger challenge though is going to be at the end of each lap as you try to break down how to consistently grab all the capsules in 3 waves, and I like to do this in one big right to left motion. In story mode, a hard mode clear unlocks some custom parts, and a very hard mode clear unlocks a unique character. When this game released, you had an arcade counterpart called F-Zero AX, where you could use your GameCube memory card to unlock the same parts in racers. But because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, my options were to either get good, use an action replay, or just never unlock them. For Chapter 1, the AX parts aren't anything special, but on very hard, we unlock Rainbow Phoenix, which is a great beginner vehicle, but by the time you unlock him, you're not going to need a beginner vehicle anyways. At least he has one of the coolest theme songs in the entire game. For Chapter 2, we have a race against Samurai Goroh where boulders fall off onto the path. It looks intimidating at first, but they fall into the same spots every single time, so you'll realize that you don't even need to change sides too often to dodge most of them. Traditionally, you would want to drive normally for most of the race, and then spam all your boosts near the end to overtake them and secure the lead. But we have a few tricks up our sleeve. There are at least 3 to 4 advanced techniques we can use here, but we're just going to focus on one, and we're going to focus on it for most of the video. Snaking. Before starting a race, you can tweak your stats a bit, and there's a quirk by going to max acceleration. You can alternate between the L button plus analog stick left, and the R button plus analog stick right, and this will allow you to achieve far greater speeds than normal, but it's very difficult to control. And if you crash into a wall or get attacked by an opponent while snaking, most of your health will disappear, and in some rare cases, all of it. The rewards exceed the risks though, and while some characters are better at it than others, and generally you would want a heavier vehicle to do it, Captain Falcon is more than good enough to pull it off. So even with a pretty bad hit against one of the boulders, we're able to pass him and obtain all of our prizes, though there's nothing too crazy in this batch of rewards. Next up is Chapter 3, where we go undercover into a race in order to help Silver Nielsen win a bet off of insider knowledge. You sure we're the good guys here? Thankfully, no one ever questions why the mysterious masked racer has a vehicle that looks exactly like the Blue Falcon. And this is by far the easiest story mode mission to beat on very hard. Not only can you craft some big shortcuts by boosting into a jump pad, but even without the guardrails on a number of sections, it's a wide enough course that it's still pretty easy to snake on, and you don't have to think about it too much. Then we have Chapter 4, which to us is the single most important one. Challenge of the Bloody Chain, which brings back the Death Race format from F-Zero X, with a few small differences. You have 2 main types of attacks, the spin attack and the side attack. The spin attack has a wider radius and is easier to hit your opponents with, but it deals less damage. However, you can spin attack while boosting in order to deal more damage. The side attack is far more precise, but it deals significantly more and can one-shot many opponents. Mastering both of them here is the key to victory. because defeating an opponent also restores your energy. There are two ways to take out the leader, Michael Chain. You can either defeat every other opponent and then he'll slow down, or you can wait until the final stretch to face off against him. So how does snaking affect all this? Well, it's a little complicated. He can basically speed up to avoid you if you go too fast, but if you are a top tier snaker, you may still be able to sneak in a hit or two early on. But that's irrelevant because there's a massive healing strip halfway. So my approach is kind of a hybrid. Snake and spin to get ahead and heal, and then snake to the end to reattempt the ending as fast as possible. On very hard, you really need to focus on the side attacks, because as tempting as it is to spin attack as he comes from behind, he just has too much health, so you need to predict which direction he's going to come on in order for you to side attack. But after we defeat him and win the race on very hard, we are presented with the ultimate reward. Dawn Genie. This absolute unit of a character drives the Fat Shark, which is undoubtedly the single best non-custom machine in the entire game. And when you look at all the course records set by players over the years, you will see him at the top of the leaderboards a lot. It is genuinely ridiculous how powerful they made him, and once you get to the Staff Ghost times, there are a number of courses where you don't have to be the best on your technique, and you can just beat the Ghost on stats alone. But moving on for now, Chapter 5 is Save Jody. From both a casual and expert perspective, this is considered by most people to be the single hardest mission. The premise is simple enough. Go fast and don't hit the doors. The doors have the same closing patterns every single time, and on normal you have 50 seconds, but once you get to very hard, you have only 40, meaning that you need near absolute perfection to pull it off. Best case scenario, you might be able to get away with a single light scrape on a door or a single missed boost capsule, but more often than not, that alone will be enough to end the run. Take even a moderate hit or miss 2 capsules though, and that's for sure game over. On both normal and hard, you can definitely get away with sliding via L and R in order to make it through the doors more easily, but on very hard, the speed loss is too great and you can't afford to use it. Snaking is theoretically possible, but it's just not worth it, so this is a max speed mission. One trick that I like to incorporate is pausing right before a door if I think I'm at a bad angle, and then I can adjust accordingly. But ultimately, this is one of those moments where the best advice is to just practice, get good, and don't lose hope. On my winning run, I didn't think it was going to be a win, but I needed to practice on the final booster section anyway, so I kept going. And I could not have been any closer. Looking at the replay, I'm pretty sure Captain Falcon got a concussion, and Jody definitely died later that night from her injuries, but the game counted it as a win, and that's all that matters. Now, in the Japanese version, you don't get that half-second grace period, and you'll lose the mission right at 40 seconds. So I went ahead and improved my best time in order to be fair. Moving on to Chapter 6, if you've ever seen the movie Speed, this is basically that. If you go under a certain speed, you die. The track layout is exactly the same on all 3 difficulties, but for each step up you go, the lowest speed you're allowed to hit increases. This one isn't too difficult, but at 45,700 meters, the length of this mission makes reattempts a bit more painful, especially when the biggest challenges are all near the very end. A lot of guides will recommend max speed on this one, but I completely disagree and go max acceleration every time, and that has nothing to do with snaking. Realistically, one strong hit is a game over for you anyways, but with a lower top speed, you have more time to react to upcoming obstacles. The bulky cars will move over, while the smaller ones will stay put. I also like to avoid the boost pads because there's no rush if you're at a stable unboosted top speed. The other huge advantage with max acceleration is better steering. One of the big tests here is knowing which type of turn to use at certain points, but the standard turn can handle most of them at max acceleration. You want to save your boost power as much as possible because you need at least 3 to cross the dirt patches, and you may need more to save you through the 2 big sharp turns or to save you on the combined car and dirt section. After clearing Chapter 6 on very hard, we unlocked Goroh to purchase in the shop. You would think that you would unlock him from Chapter 2 on very hard since that's a story chapter that features Samurai Goroh, but I digress. And now it's time for another infamous mission, Chapter 7. If you didn't think that Save Jody was the hardest part of the game, then your vote is probably for this one. Here we have a custom Mute City track featuring a very deadly narrow passage, lava pits everywhere, and a much more aggressive Black Shadow and Blood Falcon than usual. For max speed players, you can try to predict which side Black Shadow is going to pass you on, and try to knock him out at the beginning of the race, which makes it a lot easier, but I didn't need to do this. And now it's time for what is quite possibly going to be my hottest take in the entire game. I think that this mission gets easier as the difficulty increases. Normally the experience is you spending the entire first lap being bumped around and outspec'd by Black Shadow, which is considered to be the second best non-custom machine in the entire game. Then you play catch up on lap 2 before barely squeezing through on lap 3. but each increment of difficulty adds an additional lap required. So now you have more room to compensate for your mistakes if you weren't perfect on a lap. And I had 2 bad laps on my winning run. And inversely, if you catch a lead, you have more time and opportunity to secure it further. If you can survive 3 laps, you can survive 5, and this actually took me more attempts to beat on normal than it did very hard. And the same logic applies to Chapter 8 as well, where each increase in difficulty adds an additional lap, and I think that makes it easier. On top of that, Chapter 8 is much easier than Chapter 7, and thematically much cooler. You're going to hell to race Deathborn. You'll have 2 main threats to worry about here. Boosting through the lava is practically a death sentence to your health, and on some parts, turns especially, you can go so fast that you accidentally fly off the course, even if it doesn't look like it. There's not too much else to say about this one, other than the fact that you can't destroy Deathborn in combat, and the music is pretty fitting. Deathborn's biggest weakness is that he's so aggressive with attacking Captain Falcon, so every time he gets near, he's gonna spin attack and lose speed. So really this just became a matter of surviving enough laps. And speaking of survival, Chapter 9 is a race against the creators. The course is highly intimidating at first due to the sheer lack of guardrails, but since you're effectively racing a staff ghost, you have no randomness to deal with. It is pure skill and the ability to remain focused for 3 laps. On normal difficulty at max speed, you don't need to boost a single time to win the race. And on hard, you can easily reserve boosts for the longest straight paths and still have time to spare. But once you finally reach very hard, you'll need to get a better idea of when to safely get your boosts in. But once again, I kinda prefer the acceleration route for reasons similar to Chapter 6. Being able to consistently and comfortably hit sharper turns. For safety reasons, I kept the snaking to a minimum and focused more so on maximizing turning efficiency to shave several seconds over the course of 3 laps. Even on very hard though, the Staff Ghost isn't that fast. This will almost never be a matter of speed, but just surviving all 3 laps. Clearing every mission on normal will get you Deathborn in the Dark Schneider, clearing every mission on hard will get you Spade in the Magic Seagull, and clearing Chapter 9 for the first time on very hard will get you PJ in the Groovy Taxi. I wonder what that's a reference to. After clearing story mode, our next major area of focus is going to be time attack. Each course will have a Staff Ghost time, and if you finish within 10 seconds of it, you'll get tickets and the opportunity to buy it. Then by purchasing, loading, and defeating the Staff Ghost, you can get even more tickets. On the Retro Achievements side of things, it's explicitly tied to the time though, so if you just so happen to naturally first try a bunch of Staff Ghost times, you can get the points for winning before you actually unlock it. One thing that you'll notice is that I defeated most of the Staff Ghosts with Pico. This is not optimal at all. Now that I understand the game fairly well, I know that Samurai Goroh would have been the better starting vehicle to choose. But really you should just wait until you get the Fat Shark or a good custom vehicle, because simply outspecking your opponent can close that skill gap in your favor. But there's no denying that driving like this is pretty lore accurate for Pico. For Mute City Twist Road, a lot of comments called this one of the toughest ones, but I accidentally got it first try when grinding tickets for the next story mission. One important detail about snaking is that it doesn't work on steep slopes or cylinders, so on this loop you need to boost instead. Though the time window is narrow enough that you'll likely need to master both snaking and boosting at the same time, or just use Fat Shark. And by the end, I was pulling sub 50s with Dawn Genie. Same logic applies to the next course, Casino Palace Split Oval. But there's one huge problem that makes this one of the true hardest Staff Ghosts. You need to go fast, but on the final turn, going too fast will launch you off the track and kill you. But this is one of those courses where even with snaking, you're going to be boosting nearly the entire time. So getting a feel for when to slow down and then quickly regaining your momentum is going to be the key to victory. This course will also introduce the general concept of hitting all the boost pads possible on the first lap and then hitting all the heel strips on the second and third. Then Sand Ocean Surface Slide is a bit more straightforward. The boost locations aren't hard to hit, and the optimal driving path is simple enough. It's a snaking friendly course minus the final portion, so by saving the boost until here, this was an easy first attempt clear. Lightning Loop Cross is a bit more complex, but it's still snaking friendly. You need to be careful on the middle walls while making sure to take the correct path for each lap, and then these center dips can interrupt your speed. Just beyond here you can fly off the course if you hit the wall at just the wrong angle, but this was still a first attempt clear. Which made the achievement name fairly amusing, because at this point in time, I still didn't know what an MTS was. Then for the final level of the Ruby Cup, we have one of my personal favorite courses in terms of design, Aeropolis Multiplex. This is a great course to practice your turn types and build up your intermediate tech. It also has boost pads that aren't too hard to hit, and snaking through this section is satisfying every single time. To deal with the U-turn near the beginning, I like to drift before letting off into a slide in order to miss the wall. Even from a non-snaking perspective, this Staff Ghost is pretty generous on time, and even childhood me was able to defeat this one, making it a first attempt clear here. Moving on to the Sapphire Cup, Big Blue Drift Highway has one of my favorite backgrounds in the entire game. Course-wise though, it really is as simple as snake to win, because I was incredibly sloppy here and hit the wall on nearly every single lap, and sometimes even hit the overhead debris, yet still got this on my first attempt with a suboptimal vehicle. Then we have another personal favorite course of mine in terms of design, Port Town Aerodive, and the giant Rob is a nice bonus touch. The level is snaking friendly, and it feels pretty good to get that speed going, but you do have several segments where you can't snake. As a result, I like to save my boost for the multi-drop segments and that final upward slope at the end. This was another first attempt clear, and really just a fun course to show off on. Also, I'm going to be completely honest here, it took me almost 23 years to realize that it's Port Town Aero Dive and not Aero Drive. Moving on to Greenplant Mobius Ring, this one took a few attempts, but it's not too bad once you get the hang of everything. It also has one of my favorite songs in the entire game. The course design is relatively straightforward, but the slopes make it slightly harder to snake on. Not impossible though. You can, however, fly off the course if you snake at just the wrong spot. So pick a side to snake on so you can make it through the slopes, and I make sure to slow down for the healing strip so I can boost through if I ever begin to lose my momentum on the turns. So while this wasn't a first attempt clear, we still haven't crossed into the extremely difficult territory yet. And now it's time to cross into the extremely difficult territory with Port Town Longpipe. And this ended up being one of the last staff ghosts that I defeated. With Don Genie and max speed, you don't need to hit every single boost pad to emerge victorious, but you will need to get used to hitting most of them. And most of that important memorization is in the first half of the lap. The problem with snaking here though is that you have to snake very quickly so that you don't hit the slopes and kill your momentum. So this is one of the rare moments where I busted out a custom machine to do the job. The best moments to use your boost are going to be on the flat portions at the beginning, on the first half of the lap if you miss more than one boost pad, during the wavy portion, or if you scrape near the end, because all of these moments can help you save your speed. This was one of the two maps where my fingers were sore by the end of it from death gripping the controller so much, but it felt great to finally overcome. And our final level in the Sapphire Cup is Mute City Serial Gaps. This one is relatively straightforward in terms of optimal driving path and boost pad locations, but it can be a challenge to survive all 3 laps, to the point where once I did survive going fast for 3 laps, I was pretty close to the staff ghost time already. There are a few neat tricks you can pull off here, such as boosting into a jump pad and then letting off the accelerator in order to glide a long distance with L and R. But you don't need anything too fancy to beat this staff ghost. I would call it one of the harder ones though. And now, it's time to enter the Emerald Cup with what is undoubtedly the hardest staff ghost. Whether you're max speed or snaking, if you can beat Firefield Cylinder Knot staff ghost, you can beat them all. There's definitely an argument to be made that it would be easier to just memorize the boost pad locations and go the max speed build with Don Genie or a custom machine, but I'm not a normal person. So I ended up going with Black Shadow because of his distinct turning abilities that would allow me to snake without going too far left or right to kill the momentum. Generally speaking, the best time to use your boost are going to be over the knot portions of Cylinder Knot, but for me, it was more of a use whenever I'm losing speed, usually happening by turning too fast and going airborne. This ended up being a shorter stream than usual because my hands were just so sore by the end of this. But after I completed this staff ghost and saved Jody on very hard, the rest of the set was more or less a victory lap. For Greenplant Intersection, this looks like it would be a difficult course, but I got it on my first attempt. It has just enough going for it to still be a snaking friendly course. Whether you're at max speed or snaking, just do the best you can in the tube and spam your boost whenever you slow down because there's plenty of healing in the first half of the lap. Then if you're snaking, you don't even need to hit the boost pads on the final portion of the lap, you just need to be careful of the final walls at the end. Though by the end I was still slipping through the boost pads while snaking to show off the precision a bit. Our next course is Casino Palace Double Branches, and for whatever reason, I keep forgetting that this is in the Emerald Cup. This is a fun course casually, but from a staff ghost perspective, this was one of the harder ones. But not for the reasons you think. While there are sections near the beginning of the lap without guardrails, that wasn't the challenge. The challenge is that every single time the course dips, you run the risk of flying off the track. So in other words, it's the exact same problem as Casino Palace Split Oval, but much more frequent. As far as the actual branches go, you can snake through them, but I prefer to take the jump pads whenever possible, just because it's much more consistent. This kind of reminds me of Chapter 9 on Very Hard a bit, because it's not really a matter of the time, it's just a matter of surviving. Once I memorized where all the dips were, I had no problem beating this staff ghost, but that did take about a dozen attempts. And when I was doing the Grand Prix in the end, I realized that this is a course that I didn't really appreciate so much as a kid, but I enjoy quite a bit now. On a similar note, our next course, Lightning Halfpipe, is one that I absolutely despised as a kid. If you were to travel far enough into the abyss, you'll probably find the graveyard of all the racers I retired there over the years. Back in the day when I was trying to get the Diamond Cup unlocked, I would just settle for last place, trying to take out as many vehicles as I can along the way, before earning those points back in the final race. But nowadays I find this course a little bit easier to manage once you can commit to wanting to go fast. The real enemy of this course is hesitation. There are a few interesting shortcuts you can take by boosting off the half pipe like it's a Tony Hawk game, but the only one that I like to consistently pull off is right here. Unlike many of the courses featured so far, this wasn't just a matter of surviving long enough to get the Safco's time, because I was able to complete it, but actually did struggle to reach the time a bit. But similar to Firefield Cylinder Knot and Port Town Long Pipe, when Plan A didn't work, Plan B was to just snake twice as fast. And our final course of the Emerald Cup is Big Blue Ordeal. And for reasons similar to Aeropulse Multiplex, this is another personal favorite course of mine. Great design course-wise, beautiful visuals, and it has just a little bit of everything to help you practice your intermediate tech and make you much better at the game without any of the individual obstacles being unreasonable. But unlike Multiplex, this wasn't a first attempt clear, and I did have to work a little bit for this Staff Ghost. The flip side of that though is that I didn't necessarily take the best paths or use the best vehicles. I made a bunch of mistakes, I scraped the walls, and I was still able to make it, so it's far from an impossible time. This probably was my single favorite Staff Ghost to overcome, and not just because chat went absolutely wild with the gift subs. It's that the challenge level for this course is just right. And speaking of the challenge level being just right, we enter the Diamond Cup next, and our first course is Cosmo Terminal Trident, which to me is one of the most iconic courses in the game. To unlock both the Diamond Cup and the Master Class difficulty, you have to complete Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald Cups on the Expert difficulty. And while in this playthrough I may have casually done that first try while grinding tickets for the story mode, as a kid, I needed to build a custom machine to even stand a chance, and simply unlocking the Diamond Cup felt like one big accomplishment in itself. So after working so hard to have the very first course on the Diamond Cup be one with almost no guardrails, just screamed to me that the journey was only just beginning. It's almost like this game's equivalent to playing Ocarina of Time and feeling that dramatic difference between the child dungeons and the adult dungeons for the very first time. And while this course blesses you with one of the most intense songs in the entire game, the slightest mistake or overcorrection can almost immediately spell the end. So now let's take a moment to talk about vehicle stats. You may have noticed that some of them don't meet your expectations, and long story short, don't take the rankings as gospel. Many of the stats are misleading, if not an outright lie. And one of the easiest ways to demonstrate this is to build a custom machine with a AAA ranking, and then test drive it and be confused when you find out that it sucks. There are a lot of other hidden stats and mechanics that play a role, such as weight. So for the Cosmo Terminal Staff Ghost, I took advantage of these hidden stats and built an extremely heavy vehicle with the intention of it only ever being viable for this one course. Since it's so heavy that the steering sucks, I don't have to worry about accidentally steering too hard and flying off the ledge. So with that struggle out of the way, we have just a few key components in order to win this race. The most important part is choosing the correct path on lap 1 versus 2 and 3, and while some people like to get crazy by hopping sections of the track, it's definitely not required. Then part 2 is to maximize efficiency, and you'll notice that I fairly often drive pretty close to the ledge in order to minimize how much additional distance I'm driving. Additionally, once I reach the jump, I hold down in order to maximize my speed before pulling up at the end. And the final key to complete this was to get the proper groove for the boost timing. You don't want to be too aggressive or else you'll run out, but you also can't be too slow, and I definitely had to be a bit more aggressive with it than I'm used to. At the end of the day, this Staff Ghost was a test of pure speed and skill, and I absolutely loved it. Our next course is a slightly harder one, but it was still a really fun one to overcome. Sand Ocean Lateral Shift. If you watch the Staff Ghost video for this, you'll notice a unique technique that they utilize: shift boosting. By quickly leaving the track and returning onto it, you'll get a speed boost, and by chaining this together, you can go way faster than even snaking will let you. While this trick works in other locations too, such as Chapter 2 in Story Mode or Cosmo Terminal Trident, Sand Ocean Lateral Shift is the best place to begin practicing this technique. But to make it perfectly clear, even with a max speed build, you definitely don't need to utilize this technique in order to defeat the Staff Ghost. From a snaking perspective, I did change from Pico to Roger Buster for some slightly better steering, but once again, this is far from an optimal choice and I just didn't know as much then as I do now. For the snaking experience, you'll spend roughly the first half of the lap snaking, and then the second half with the narrow passages, sliding and boosting. Then you'll pick it up at the end of the lap and try to minimize your wall hits, and rinse and repeat. Really, this course is just another instance of once you survive long enough to complete all 3 laps, you should have the staff ghost time already. And while most of my staff ghost coverage has been in course order rather than completion order, in the case of Firefield Undulation, I did do that one right after. This course is a pretty fun one, but with the power of hindsight, it probably would have been easier to do this with max speed instead of max acceleration and snaking. Not only do you run the risk of flying off the course into the lava, but this is one of those rare courses where you do want to hit every jump pad possible, and you're also not going to snake across the bumps. So then why did I commit to doing this one while snaking, you may ask? Well, I didn't. I just got extremely lucky and cleared this on the first attempt, though it definitely didn't feel deserved, because I was pretty sloppy on it. But a win is a win, and we celebrate those. Our next course is Aeropolis Dragon Slope, and this was another first attempt clear, because just like Aeropolis Multiplex, none of the course is particularly hard. It's also a relatively long course with a very generous staff ghost time, and none of the boost pads are too hard to hit, not that you need to hit them all anyways. When it comes to the drops, some people get a bit crazy by drifting off to one direction and then side attacking in the other to pick up more speed, but I didn't even bother to try that. But now, it is time for the final course of the Diamond Cup. Phantom Road, Slimline Slits. The only course in the game to have a 6-star difficulty rating. So as you might imagine, this level's staff ghost was an entirely different level of absurdly easy, and I got it on the first attempt. We already completed a harder version of this course back in story mode. I was snaking without guardrails then, and now we have almost entirely guardrails. So by being just a bit cautious on the healing strips, we sacrifice the paint job and a few concussions as we scrape across the walls and very easily clear up the Diamond Cup. So now it's time for the cup that most players will never experience, the AX Cup. On the AX arcade machines, completing one of the 6 courses and saving that data to your memory card would unlock it in F-Zero GX. In the main game though, you would unlock it by completing every other Grand Prix on the Master difficulty. For our first course, Aeropolis Screwdrive is straightforward enough. Drive in circles, use Don Genie to snake or out-tech the staff ghost, and there's really not too much else to it. Then for Outer Space Meteor Stream, we have a unique music track that doesn't play anywhere else, and from a snaking perspective, this was another easy first attempt clear. In fact, every single course in the AX Cup was a first attempt clear on the staff ghost. And really that mostly stems from there being far less opportunities to die on these courses, combined with relatively generous staff ghost times. Overall, Outer Space Meteor Stream is a very fun course both casually and competitively. Our third stage is Port Town Cylinder Wave, which means that we once again have to face off against our arch nemesis, cylinders. But thankfully the final cylinder stage we're up against is actually the easiest of them all. And I'd even argue that this is the best stage to practice snaking on cylinders for, because they're noticeably wider than the ones on the other stages. Just like the other cylinder stages, the best time to use your boosts are going to be when you start losing your momentum. The only part of the course that I wouldn't recommend snaking on is near the very end because the cylinder gets so narrow that it's going to throw you off. But again, with all the AX levels being so safe and the staff ghost times being so generous, even with a rough 3 laps in a row, I still got the time without a fuss. Then track 4 is another personal favorite of mine, Lightning Thunder Road. Massive track with a lot of fun elements, but some narrow passages to test your precision. Similar to Aeropolis Multiplex and Big Blue Ordeal, this is that perfect level of intermediate difficulty. And because it's such a long course, even on max speed with Don Genie, you have enough length to really abuse the top speed to come out on top, while also not having to deal with too difficult to hit boost pads. Also, I just have to say that every single time I made it through this section without hitting the wall, it was an absolute adrenaline rush. And our 5th course is Green Plant Spiral, which is another very long one, which once again means that a max speed Don Genie alone can do the trick without any sort of perfection. However, there are some trickier turns to make and some harder to reach boost pads when compared to Lightning Thunder Road. There's also a small skip you can make near the beginning with a good boost. Very fun course, and I really enjoyed how it felt pretty chaotic, especially in the Grand Prix, but not unreasonably chaotic. Any mistakes on the course itself were entirely my fault, and even with a few bonks here and there, this was a first attempt clear. But while that marks 5 staff ghosts defeated in the AX Cup, there's actually a 6th course, but you can't access it from Grand Prix. Remember the course that Captain Falcon trains on in story mode? Well, that's our final level with Mute City Sonic Oval, And it's honestly a pretty anticlimactic way to finish off the Staff Ghost, because it's an even more straightforward course than Arrow Polished Screwdrive, and the Staff Ghost isn't that difficult. And with that, we have finally conquered all of the Staff Ghosts. But we still have one final portion of the game to take care of. We have to win a Master Difficulty Grand Prix with every single racer in their original machine in order to unlock their ending video. And as much as I love this game, most aren't really anything to write home about. Some are okay, some I actually enjoyed, many of them are cringe, and some will leave you absolutely confused as you try to process what on earth you just witnessed. But this was also a good chance to actually try out every single racer and get a feel for their machine, since younger me just built the Frostlinks G4 to unlock the Diamond and AX Cups before calling it a day. And there were a number of machines that I grew to appreciate for one reason or another. But while this would seem like an easy grind since most of these vehicles can snake, and because you can just grind the ending videos on the Ruby Grand Prix, some vehicles are significantly harder to snake with, to the point to where you're better off just driving normally. But after mastering the art of driving like a drunken lunatic, driving normally is a step down in difficulty. And thankfully, unlike games like Mario Kart where one bad race can cost you an entire Grand Prix, it's not impossible to win a Grand Prix in F-Zero GX without winning first in a single race, as long as you're consistently a top placer. And if you defeat an opponent and complete the race, they get 0 points for that round, meaning that murdering to farm extra lives and resetting if you can't defeat the top rivals is actually a viable strategy. And of course, you'll naturally have so many tickets by the end of this that you'll be able to buy out everything in the shop for those achievements. But for the ending videos, there was an unholy trinity of sorts. Vehicles that to me personally, had little if any redeeming qualities at all. Low top speeds, very light, not viable for snaking, and actually took me about half a dozen attempts each to finally win a cup on Master Difficulty. And coincidentally enough, they were all AX racers. Spade, Digiboy, and Daigoro. Oh boy, Daigoro. Now I understand why I unlocked Daigoro in Chapter 6 instead of Chapter 2. It's because Samurai Goro is completely ashamed to be affiliated with such bottom tier trash and wants nothing to do with Daigoro. Even the murder strategy isn't an easy approach because there's little chance of him going toe to toe with the likes of Black Shadow or Don Genie, who are going to consistently top the charts due to the sheer weight difference. And while plenty of other vehicles on the lighter end can at least survive an attack or two, I swear that these three would fly off the track from the slightest bump in a way that I have just never experienced before. But eventually, all of the stars aligned, and we got just enough top or near the top finishes to barely squeeze through and win our Grand Prix. And after saving enough decent machines for a smooth livestream finale, we can mark another Retro Achievements set mastered. But some Retro Achievements users may be a bit confused, and that's because there used to be a lot more to this set. Controversially, viewing each interview question with each racer used to be a part of the core set, but since then it's been split into a proper subset. It actually got split partway through my attempt at the set. In my opinion, it should have been that way from the very beginning because it's much more akin to Shadow the Hedgehog 326 endings in terms of grinding. In fact, I would even argue that it's worse than Shadow the Hedgehog 326 endings because at least that game has an ending gallery that tracks it, while F-Zero GX just grays out the dialogue to show that you've experienced it once before. But to be as fair as possible and to view this from every possible angle, this set was developed during the "we swear that multi-set tracking is coming soon guys, any day now" era, which definitely did affect a number of devs that were making things with multi-tracking in mind from the very beginning, and therefore putting it in core set before moving it into subset later was an efficient way to keep the progress tracking from the very beginning. But at the end of the day, I'm really grateful that feedback was listened to and applied. The current iteration of the set is now one of my favorites on the site, though props to players like Weapon Metsu who committed to the full set from the very beginning. One day I will go back for the subset, since as I climb the leaderboards towards my goal of top 1%, I see it as a free, albeit slow 3,000 points, that I can chip away at in short bursts as I continue to casually enjoy the game. But there's no need for me to do that before this video, because I don't think it would add anything to the video. So with that, that's all I got for now. Thank you to the many viewers who tuned in to see me on Twitch, and genuinely made this some of the best gaming memories I've had in recent years. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and hype for more Retro Achievements content, and until next time,